Committee will now welcome the second panel, the gentleman from North Carolina, honorable gentleman, my dear friend Walter Jones, the gentlewoman Marcy Kaptur, the gentleman Matt Gans, the gentlewoman Jackie Rosen, and last I'm going to acknowledge the gentleman from Windsor, Colorado, the gentleman, a member of the committee who would be available to either speak from the dais or to come to the table as he would choose, but we'll go to Mr. Buck at the last instance. Well, I thought we had a couple other members here. I noticed, I know the gentleman, Matt Gans, was here, so we will hold a place for him. Mr. Jones, we're delighted that you're here. The gentleman from North Carolina is a distinguished member of this body. We're delighted that you're here. Without objection, anything you and any other member of this panel have will be entered in the record. Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Yes, I'm here with the lady from Ohio, Ms. Kaptur, who's been a friend of mine for many, many years. On this issue of her amendment, which I 100% support, of all the bills that I have voted for in 22 years, the two that I regret the most were first, the unnecessary war in Iraq, and second, the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which took place in 1999, the repeal of Glass-Steagall. I had constituents back in my district, some in the securities business, some in the insurance business, asking me not to repeal Glass-Steagall, to keep those industries separate. And now, after I made this mistake in 1999, I can see how that change in the existing law by repealing Glass-Steagall had created the chaos that we have seen on Wall Street. I call it greed, quite frankly. I was here when we bailed out Wall Street. I was here when we had to stay up all weekend. Many of you were here as well. What do? We bailed out dishonesty and greed. And I believe sincerely that what we are doing today, this has nothing to do with the Choice Act or the Unchoice Act. I think both of them ought to be set aside, and let's put the repeal of Glass-Steagall on the floor, the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall on the floor. Let's see how that debate goes, and see how the consumers, not the special interests, but how the consumers will get behind a reinstatement of Glass-Steagall. In fact, President Trump has stated many times that he believes there should be some type of a new Glass-Steagall. No details on it, but that he believes that we do need to come back to a discussion and debate of Glass-Steagall. A couple other points very quickly. I don't know if any of you remember, I happened to vote against it, but a year ago in 2016, the Buffett mobile home business has most to gain from deregulation plan. And the reason, I'm going to read this very quickly. Clayton Home is pushing Congress to roll back consumer protections on mobile home loans. Warren Buffett's mobile home business wants Congress to curtail recent consumer safeguards put it in place after the financial crisis, saying a rollback is necessary to ensure that competing lenders continue to provide loans. But in reality, the deregulation plan that recently passed the United States House would be a boon, almost exclusively for the budget. Buffett's Clayton Homes, according to an analysis of 2013 federal loan data by the Seattle Times, based on interest rates levels from that year, Clayton controlled 91% of the market segment set to be deregulated. I don't know why we do not see the value of having some type of a debate on a reinstatement of Glass-Steagall. The last point I want to make, I have countless junior Marine bases in my district, and I have seen the Marines, particularly at a young age, taken advantage of. And I want to say this, that I agree with the veterans of foreign wars, that too much in this Choice Act will be, in my humble opinion, a disadvantage to those who wear the uniform. So again, I stand here with a lady from Ohio, a very dear friend of mine, Marcy Kaptur, and I support her amendment and her position on this issue. Thank you for giving me this chance to share my concerns and my belief about what needs to be done for the consumer. Thank you.
Mr. Jones, we're delighted that you're here, and thank you very much, not only for your intellectual contribution to this, but your ideas, and they're always welcome at the Rules Committee. Ms. Kaptur, we're delighted that you're here, and the gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Slaughter, and honorable committee members. Thank you for granting us the opportunity to speak before you with this bipartisan amendment to H.R. 10, and I'm very honored to be here with my esteemed colleague, a gentleman of great integrity from North Carolina, Mr. Jones. Our amendment proposes to table the current legislation that you've been considering and instead substitute our legislation to fix the fundamental danger in today's banking system, and that is the severe tilt away from prudent banking toward risky speculation. Frankly, if you in your deliberations choose to allow us to go to the floor with a freestanding bill, we'll accept that too. Our bill would essentially move our financial system toward a healthier, more competitive, less concentrated financial system because it would guarantee more robust economic growth. So it's pro-competition. Our bill, the Return to Prudent Banking Act, says the answer to economic growth rests on separating risky speculation from prudent banking. It reinstates the Glass-Steagall Act separation between the type of banking that places bets and the type of banking that takes consumer deposits and hopefully then pays fair interest for retaining people's money and makes fair-priced loans. For nearly 7 decades following the Great Depression, financial institutions were barred from acting in any combination as both commercial and speculative banks. This worked out very well for most of the 20th century, and our financial system and the nation's GDP grew exponentially over 65 years. That era has been described as golden, as wolves were not allowed to prey on the people's hard-earned depository savings. And during that era, consumers were paid a fair rent for their money. But in 1999, Congress repealed the Glass-Steagall Act. Both Walter and I were here during that consideration. That action clearly accelerated a system that now a handful of Wall Street institutions have taken majority control of America's financial future. Banks grew riskier. Speculation was embedded in prudent banking to a level that allowed pure greed to win. And the American taxpayer was given the mammoth bill when the deregulated financial sector fell apart. Since 2008, adding insult to injury, the perpetrators responsible for the economic crisis got even bigger. All the numbers prove that. Post-2008 financial crisis, America continues on a path to mega banking. Enormous accumulation of banking assets now rests largely with the Big Six. And I'll say their names: J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley largely control the movement of nearly 2/3 of the money in our economy. The Big Six combined own 62% of $16.2 trillion worth of banking assets. And for each of us, we must ask the question, do you believe that 62% by only 6 is far too much power in too few hands? Banking profits were at record highs last year of $170 billion. Unfair competition has reduced the number of commercial banks to approximately 5,000 across this nation of 50 states. When I was first elected to Congress, there were 15,000 such institutions. Since 1989, accelerating more after 2008, the number of commercial banks in the United States has been cut by almost 60%. Think about that. With increased regulatory burdens, non-Wall Street banks and credit unions have been diminished even more. And we see mergers, we see extinction. The number of credit unions has been reduced by half. This consolidation to mega mergers means less competition and less service to consumers, and where service is granted, more expensive service. Before the 2008 collapse, the Big Six banks earned an average $5 billion. Since the economic collapse, and despite Dodd-Frank, from 2009 to 2014, they have now doubled that profit to $41.7 billion. That's a 66.4% increase in just 5 years to the Big Six. So where has modern mega banking taken us? Let's look at the depositors that we all represent. Main Street Americans' certificates of deposit and checking accounts are being paid at the lowest rate in modern history, having fallen under 1% over the past decade. Grandma Moses earns almost nothing on her CD, carefully saved over decades. In fact, her nest egg actually is losing money, factoring in inflation because the banks pay so little. It's trading at record levels since the start of this administration, and meanwhile, 5.4 million homeowners still remain underwater on their mortgage due to the collapse of 2008. J.P. Morgan Chase, the largest of the Big Six, said it expects to get even bigger and more profitable in the next few years, having reached $2.49 trillion in assets at the end of 2016 alone. That's too much power in too few hands. Clearly, a giant transfer of wealth is accelerating from Main Street to Wall Street. Competitors are being eaten up, and the banks are not paying depositors fair rent for their money. Now, Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders ran on a campaign to break up the banks. So did Republican Donald Trump. At a campaign rally, the president even stated, and I quote, "It's time for a 21st century Glass-Steagall." Democrats and Republicans have both memorialized support for reinstating Glass-Steagall in their platforms, and the RNC wasted fewer words than the Democratic platform, saying plainly, quote, "We support reinstating the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, unquote, which prohibits commercial banks from engaging in high-risk investment." In closing, with our bipartisan amendment to H.R. 10, now is the time to go full throttle. Our nation has a real shot to get this right before another looming financial crisis, perhaps anchored in corporate borrowing, hits. Congress has the ability to deliver both party platforms and restore Glass-Steagall to secure the financial system's well-being so our nation can be fair to the generations to come. With bipartisan support, the time for Glass-Steagall is now. We must not wait, and frankly, America should not wait. I thank you, Mr. Chairman,